Hello and welcome to the Jamie Foster Brown Show. And I am Jamie Foster Brown. And today we have Wayne Smallwood, my dear friend, who is a business and sports entertainment consultant. I just love him to death. And he's blessed us by bringing his dear friend, Mr. David Weild of Weild and Company, which is based in New York and Colorado, and is established decentralized investment bank that enables investment bankers to deliver better results for corporate clients and their investors. So we have got to pay attention. Weild and Company is widely recognized for the reputation of its founder himself, David Weild, who is the former vice chairman of the NASDAQ stock market and is regarded by many as the father of the Jobs Act. The firm has strong leadership and a management team offering over 100 years of relevant experience. Just let me take this all in.
Dave, 100. Dave, that's 100. I thought you were younger than that.
Yeah, no, it's not just me, thank God.
Oh, okay.
I'm hoping it'll be me in my own right at some point. That means I had a good run.
There you go.
Thank you so much for joining us today, David Weild. I understand you are regarded by many as the father of the Jobs Act, but tell the audience, what is the Jobs Act and what does it represent?
Well, when I left NASDAQ a number of years ago, I was really kind of concerned with what I saw as sort of the bottom falling out of the small initial public offering market. And the significance of that is that you got to take a company public sooner to be able to get more people to invest in private companies and start businesses, right? So this is about economic empowerment. It's about getting capital to flow. It's really, really difficult in poor neighborhoods in the inner city. And so, I have a special place in my heart for the Black community for that reason. I call it the litmus test for how we do as a nation. If you look at the economic data, I mean, we've really kind of slowed down the upward mobility in this country. And I think that a lot of it was that they changed market structure, public markets, and it made it in turn harder to get capital into small businesses. So if you look at all the data, if you connect the dots, you start to see that we've started fewer companies in this country over the last 15, 20 years. I was out speaking. A buddy of mine, Bishop Rodney Sampson, runs something called OHUB down in Atlanta. I'm an advisor there.
Dear friend of mine. A dear friend of mine.
Yeah, well, I was just down. We were just down in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we were kicking off DAIS, which is Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Solutions for corporate America, for basically helping companies try to understand how to better be more diverse and to kind of more inclusive, et cetera, et cetera. And they have a program that they put together with the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Duke University, and Stanford that we're just rolling out. So we were just 2 weeks ago kicking it off down in Raleigh. But and he's a walk the talk kind of human being, yes, right? And he's been dedicating himself to teaching African American kids how to code, because his belief is that there's a big wealth gap that's been created because we don't have enough Black kids involved in technology businesses where a lot of the wealth is created. But back to your original point, which is around this notion of what did the Jobs Act do? We created crowdfunding, for instance, of securities, right? So it's about making it easier to get a business capitalized because you could be Black Einstein from a poor neighborhood in this country, and it's more likely that you're going to get hit by a bolt of lightning than it is to get your business financed, because most startup capital comes from friends and family, right?
You don't even have to tell me. This reminded me of how, when my husband and I were starting the magazine, how we went to all these banks, white banks. And I mean, they weren't even paying attention to the fact that this could be something good for the community. I had Sister to Sister magazine at that time. There was disinterest. They weren't even entertaining it. And so I know, reading over what you plan to do, I'm excited about it because we need this. And I love it that you want to invest in our community so we can all grow, so we can all be better off. This is just wonderful. And I praise Wayne for bringing you here to me so that we can share information and see how we can move forward in all of your efforts. And Wayne, thank you so much.
Absolutely. I know he would be of value to us because what you have stood for in this community as well, Jamie, for the last 30 or 35 years. He would be a great complement to this. And not to take a step backwards, but Dave, what I did want to ask was, you know, you started out as a geneticist, correct? And you were then you made the transition to Wall Street. How did that happen? Now I'm just curious.
Well, my dad, who is is brilliant, and he's just retired from the practice of law at the age of 90, was an intellectual property lawyer, and we used to have a debate when I was a kid at the table about whether or not they were going to be able to patent life sciences, and genetics, and I said, look, I don't count myself as an expert in intellectual property. But I said that the overwhelming public interest has to be served by giving people an incentive to invest money in finding cures for cancer through genetic engineering and similar sort of, that innovation. This was all the way back in 1980. And
Right.
So in 1980, Genentech went public, and I saw the stock go from $30 a share to 80. And there's kind
Wow.
of just this notion of capital driving innovation and funding cures for cancer and things like that. It just became real to me. And that's when I diverted to go to Wall Street, because, for me, it was about what we used to call the God's act of the God's work of investment banking, which was, actually getting companies funded to create jobs, to drive upward mobility, to solve the great challenges of our time. And so,
Right.
I spent a lot of time in Washington, but I'm not overtly political. I mean, what I like to say is I like to try and figure out what are win-win solutions for both Republicans and Democrats. I mean, if you look at how bipartisan the Jobs Act was,
Right.
and it did not just crowdfunding, but it did Regulation A plus IPOs, testing the waters so that
Yeah.
you could go out. It did a form of private placement that you could generally market a private placement for the first time. It came directly out of a paper we wrote. And the idea was to give people more tools to basically be able to, break these chains of not being able to
Yes.
get capitalized and empower people, to do things. And Americans are very good at self-control as a group. That if we're going to solve climate change, it's going to be because we have breakthroughs in technology that allow us to take heat out of the atmosphere or carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And so, we can try both, but I think we really need to, for the benefit of the next generation, to invest in the kinds of scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs that are going to solve the great challenges of our time. We need to be able to do more of it. And when I got into this business, I mean, there were years when we were doing 800, 900 IPOs, initial public offerings a year. And
Wow.
it sort of cracked down to 120 when they dropped the bottom out of the small IPO market. And so for me, I want to rebuild those volumes, rebuild investment into entrepreneurs. And I really, really want to figure out how to get money into the hands of entrepreneurs in in places that require it, inner cities, poorer areas.
Right.
It's ultimately about, look, we're all one team in America. Our
Yes, we
secret
are.
sauce is that we're diverse. There is no
Exactly.
country on earth that can do what we do, which is that you can be anybody, any culture, any creed, any color, and you can be an American. None of us are going to be on this call are going to be Chinese or are going to go to China. And yet they've got 1 billion more people than we do. So, we have to be able to recruit the best and the brightest. We have to have allies with people that think like we do, to countries that share democratic kind of ideals and inclusive ideals. And then we have to figure out how to take all of our kids, because I know, Jamie, you're really concerned about children, and I am too. I'm chairman emeritus now of the 9/11 charity Tuesdays Children. We took care of the kids that lost parents after 9/11.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
you cannot, give truth to the great aspirational goal of all men are created equal if you don't properly nurture our children. And so there's a world of haves and have-nots with the kids, right? And in particular, and I know that I've seen some of your your shows, which you're a force of nature, Jamie, and I really, I mean, I'm so.
I'm listening to you. I'm feeling like, oh my God, this is so wonderful.
You get empowered every time you speak with him.
Yes. I didn't
Dave,
even know people like him.
But
I tell you, Jamie, the fascination of this.
I have to say this. I mean, his heart is what I'm listening to. His love is what I'm listening to. His caring about our country, our world, our people is what I'm listening to, which is what's so important to me.
Absolutely.
You know, I just have chills. I'm very emotional. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Jamie, what impressed me the most is how he's been able to integrate, people of color in what he's doing and in his plans. And, that brings me back. So, I'm looking at the community, I'm looking at the people. And, guys like Rodney Sampson. Dave, how did you run into guys like this?
Oh, Rodney.
Well, I mean, Rodney, I mean, I give Rodney the credit. We were speaking, I was, for 3 years, I spoke 30 times a year on what I saw as some of these economic challenges, market structure challenges that we had to fix before the Jobs Act got passed into law. Because I'm a molecular geneticist, I'm a Wall Street guy. I don't know anything about political science. How do you get an act passed in Congress? So I went out and I anytime they gave me a podium at my own cost, I went out and I talked and I spoke about what I thought people needed to understand, hoping against all hope that there'd be people in the audience that would pick it up and it would start to sensitize folks to what we needed to do to rebuild our economy. And by the way, I think the Jobs Act is just a down payment on what we need to do. We have so much more work to do. That is awesome. But I was speaking up at the Reuters conference in Boston a number of years ago, and Rodney Sampson was in the audience. He saw me speak. He came up and he gave me his book, Kingonomics, which is, patterned after sort of the economic principles of Martin Luther King. And then he invited me to come down and speak at his Kingonomics conference, which was the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's March on Washington, which is where I had the amazing honor and privilege for the first time to meet Congressman John Lewis, who is just one of the nicest, most genuine, decent human beings that we have ever had as a nation, come in any color. Another walk the talk human being, right?
Especially after all he's endured, Dave. Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, and incredibly charitable. If you've never seen the video of him dancing to Happy in the halls of Congress, he's just a wonderful human being on every level. Principled, hardworking, sacrifice, and incredible good humor in the face of people who are clearly prejudiced and on the other side ledger. We really lost an incredibly important American when he passed. But Rodney had me come down and speak, and it was a conference that was dominated by a lot of young African Americans from the traditionally black colleges, Morehouse, Spelman, you name it, North Carolina, and what I saw was just really smart, really engaged, enthusiastic, African American kids, and the light bulb went on in my head. And it was just sort of saying, look, if your friends and family they're all looking, how do I get my idea capitalized? And if your friends and family are poor, and most startups are done with friends and family capital, yes, you have a problem. You have a systemic handicap, if you will. I don't think it's intentional prejudice or racism, but that the fact of the matter is that if you're privileged and you come from a privileged neighborhood where people are well-to-do, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get a business started, okay? And right. So if we want to restore upward mobility, we're going to have to figure out how to get capital into some of these places, and not just like opportunity zone capital, which is more construction jobs and infrastructure. That's important, but we need to get startup capital into these places. We need to get incubators going, so that people can be coached as to how to be entrepreneurs, to create real wealth, to be real innovators, so that we have actually more Black successful entrepreneurs, where ultimately this is also the proving ground for Black CEOs. If you look at the representation in corporate America, in the Fortune 500, there's an underrepresentation of African
very
Americans.
unrepresented. Absolutely.
I
Dave,
know
so
what you're saying, because when I started Sister to Sister magazine and was going around the banks and just whatever, I didn't know any better. They were just basically looking at me as if, oh, you so stupid, you must realize how we're not going to fund you. But I even went to a black owned bank also, and my magazine turned out to be, was rare, was different, and was successful. But my husband and we just had to fund it ourselves. My husband worked for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and he saw that I was starting to make money and starting to make, inroads. And so he quit his job and he started working for me. And that's how the magazine grew. And I initially started off with Bob Johnson with Black Entertainment Television. I was one of his first secretaries. And so that's how I got into the music industry. And then, of course, it led to me knowing all the celebrities and the handlers.
Mr.
Jamie, you spent
Johnson,
some time in Switzerland too, didn't you? About 8 years?
I lived there 9 years.
Right, I remember.
I was there with my husband because he was studying. Well, he went over there and he thought, oh, I can get a doctorate there. It's like being knighted over there. I mean, I know people that he was on a fast track when he got the doctorate, but it took him about 7 years. And there's still people over there that haven't gotten their doctorate yet. This is years ago. So it was we were quite a pair. But I'm really, I didn't, Rodney and I are friends, and I mean, he's so brilliant. And when you said you were with Rodney, I was just, I know how sincere you are. I know what you want for our world in general. It's not just for Black people, our world. We can't.
Well, look, it's about those that are the underdog. I mean, that have the challenges. It's up to people like, look, I got into it. I was at one of his conferences at South by Southwest, and I was on the dais and speaking, and I was in front of an African American audience, and everybody else that was speaking on the panel were African Americans, and one of them was a co-founder of Black Lives Matters, and this was 6 years ago, and I got into it with her a little bit because I said, the challenge with, I think that what Black Lives Matters has done is incredibly righteous and important. But I said, for it ultimately, this is 5 years ago, to be effective, you've got to see, you're 13.5% of the population.
Exactly.
Right? It's a democracy. You got to get over 50%, and in the Senate it's 60%. And so you need more prominent white faces advocating for Black causes, right? And I said, having spent time in Europe, you may remember that in France there was a socialist that took over, Francois Mitterrand, who was president of right, and he was able to actually privatize or take public a lot of the French enterprises because he had the credibility, with the socialists. Because he was, the Republican Party couldn't get it done because they were afraid that they were selling. This was the point I made. They were selling, French, crown jewels to the public, and it wasn't until a socialist, who everybody automatically assumes is doing the right thing by the people, picked up the same mission when he was able to get it done, and everybody embraced it. But I think that what happened with George, in the wake of George Floyd. Mm-hmm. God rest his soul, is that you got people marching in the street and COVID at the same time, because people were home, and you started seeing a diverse group of people demonstrating in the streets. And all I can say is that sends such a signal to people down in Washington that This is not just that there are a lot of people that this is not just a Black or white issue. This is an American issue. We want to see fairness. We want to see opportunity, equal opportunity. We want to see people get their slice of the American pie. We want them to be supported properly. And when you look at, you start connecting all the dots, Jamie, one of the big ones is that when you look at the single mother problem in this country, and I know how supportive you are of Black men, okay? And particularly, I was looking at the interview with Terrell, Davis, who I know, who's been there with his family. But that's not the case for a lot of families. And it's not just a black problem, it's also a Spanish and a white problem. 25% of white kids in this country are born to single parent households, 35% of Latin kids. And when I was in Congress talking to Congressman David Scott, who's African American from Atlanta, and I brought my son down there because I wanted him to see me, speak and engage. And I'm saying I said to Dave, one of the things I do a lot of times is I lead with my chin, and I test out with, people. I want to get their feedback, and I want to try things out and see, how do you feel about it?
Yes.
And I said to Congressman Scott, 65% of African American kids are born into single parent households. It was a Brookings Institute statistic I saw. And he said, with my son there, he was 16 at the time, it's higher than that. I said, how high? He said he thinks it's north of 70%. Now, it may be that he was looking at things in his region, in his district, I don't know. But suffice it to say that that's a challenge, right? And then when you start, pulling the problem apart, you can say, if you look at some of the academic literature, and you can see that some of it's mitigated by extended families. But look, let's call a spade, which is that if you're a single mom and you're trying to take care of a family, you're under-resourced, under-engaged, you may not have the male role model in the house, that there's nothing good that's going to happen a lot of times for those, black boys in particular, right? You get out of school, and another friend of ours who worked with the Knicks organization, Wayne knows, Troy Bauer, right? And Troy is, working with boys and girls clubs quite a bit, because for exactly this reason, which is to give kids some place to go to stay engaged. It's one of the reasons why we care about football and sports. It's, keeping kids engaged.
Yeah.
We need
absolutely.
We need schools to be open from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening so that mom can work. Okay.
Exactly.
It's not the leave it to beaver era any longer in this country. And so if we want everybody to be maximally productive, those kids have to be engaged all day long.
They have to be positive role models.
Hold down a job. And so we have to start thinking different about our human capital and how we nurture it and how we structure it so that those kids are going to have every chance of being successful. One of the reasons why we have an incarceration, what does incarceration do with the African American communities? It takes kids that could have been assets to our economy and it turns them into liabilities.
Right.
Okay. I mean, think about that. We have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, but we don't have the biggest population. So we have to get all of our people a better America. And part of that is to be able to create incentives for those that have to support those that have not, that don't have it. And I think if we can do that, we can transform the country in a way that we've never done it before. Now, back to my high school friend, I say that, that a lot of prejudice comes from just sheer ignorance. It's not having the experience of working with an African American, black guy that has, that shares your interests, right? Because all of a sudden, and by the way, I mean, if everybody looked like me, the world would be a really boring place. Okay, it really would be.
But cute.
Oh, thank you. Bless you. But
Dave, you know what that leads. I wanted to ask you about this now. Jamie, you don't know this, but I obviously have some insight. The last paper you wrote, Making Stock Markets Work to Support Economic Growth. It was published by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Why was that important then to you?
Well, because I think that, we blew a hole in this continuum of access to capital that, that the reason why people invest in earlier stage businesses because they think they can make a lot of money. And so, in order to help people make a lot of money from earlier stage investments, you have to get those companies public sooner. And you have to be able to have them supported. You need a liquidity event. And what we did by taking our stock markets and making them low-cost trading is we dropped the bottom out of the support model for smaller companies, which are what academics will call asymmetrical order book stocks, big seller, no buyer. So, when an institution that buys 1 million shares of a stock that trades, 10,000 shares a day, they can't do it because they're going to move the stock way up. When they try and sell it, it moves the stock way down.
Yeah, right.
They actually kill their own returns. So they leave the smart, qualified, fundamentally oriented money flees smaller capitalization companies. And then we're left with this predatory environment where guys naked short sell. It's a complete mess. And we've designed a perfect market to kind of hurt smaller capitalization public companies. And so that how do you bridge that gap to becoming, startup, early stage, and large? And so what happened in Silicon Valley is we created an incredible ecosystem of companies that now do, it used to be 4 rounds of capital and then you take the company public. Now it's 15 rounds of capital before then you have to become a unicorn before you take it public. And that's great for Silicon Valley. But let me tell you that there's not a lot of Black venture capitalists. There's not a lot of Black entrepreneurs. And this is one of the things that I'm working on with Rodney Sampson, is we've got to figure out, he's actually running a fund right now that he's trying to raise capital for. It's called 100 Black Angels and Allies, right? And
Angels and what?
100 Black Angels and Allies. And it's, and the idea is to try and get more, Black run companies financed. Okay. Noble, important thing to do. But my point is that, Silicon Valley is working for those that are part of Silicon Valley. And there's just not enough Black faces in Silicon Valley right now. Okay.
Not enough poorer people either. I mean, they ran out, the ordinary person, they ran out of there. They can't afford to live there. I know some of them.
Well, they just use a fancy term. They say re-gentrification. That's what they're saying. And I think that's just a softer blow saying we want you out.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but it's happening. And Dave, so that after writing a book of this magnitude or a paper of this magnitude, are you going to get back to writing on public policy issues?
Yeah, I mean, look,
and where are you going to focus?
We're raising around, capital right now. We got people that are interested. It's, I think it's, it's going to close. I'm going to get back to doing the public policy papers, the thought leadership. And, look, we're really good at figuring out what the value proposition is to the Republican districts and the Democratic districts, I joke, when we went in to talk to the Black Caucus the last time about, decimalization, electronic trading and things, I'm smart enough to know that I can't be the glow in the dark white guy that goes in to tell the Black Caucus what to do. But I've got friends that are African American, that care passionately about what we're doing. So, shout out to Kimmy Wales, who, went down to see David Scott with me. And one of my co-authors, if you look on the paper, Lisa Newport, is an African American woman friend of mine who went to Mills College and Sloan, MIT. And she actually ran some of the econometric models that, we did. And, and so, it ultimately is, it's teams win, how you present yourself. But we have to go, this notion of common ground is I think what I've learned is fallacious. It's sort of a myth. And a lot of people say we got to find the common ground. No, you got to craft a policy that says to Maxine Waters, who's now chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, when she goes back to her district, she's got to be able to declare victory to her people and say, this is what we did for you. And somebody in a well-to-do white neighborhood, just to put a crass point on it, has to go back to his or her district, like Jeff Hensarling was the former chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, was from Dallas, and say, this is what we did for you, right? And there has to be a win for both. And if you can do that, you can get incredible support, bipartisan support. We had a bill that was called the Jobs and Investor Confidence 2000.
The Jobs Investor Conference?
The Investor Act of 2018. And it was, and it got through the House of Representatives 406 to 4.
406 to 4. Wow.
That was the vote. And it was it was supported by the Trump administration. It was up on their blog, and the Senate was supposed to tack it onto the Senate Appropriations Bill. And then, classic self-inflicted gunshot wound from our government. Trump, decided he was going to, put his flag in the ground over the wall.
Yep.
And they shut the budget process down. So there was never an appropriations bill to tack it on. And it pushed it into the 2019 Congress, which caused the legislation to be mooted, to set basically like it doesn't exist. You got to start from scratch. But the lesson is that there's an appetite for this stuff, right? And so, back to the kind of the sin of omission, sin of omission, we know how to do this stuff. We want to do more of it. We got to get back to doing it. Because we think, it's I joke with Wayne is that, you could be a midget in an NBA, basketball game, but if you hang out in the paint long enough, you're going to get a rebound. And that's a little bit like we have to hang out in the paint long enough to make sure that we get legislation passed. I just got to get back. But that's part of what we're going to do. But in the meantime, we're going to take this thing from 100 professionals, which is where we are now in 20 states. We want to be in all 50 states. We want to grow it to 1,000 plus professionals so that we can really do some really important things in terms of flowing capital around and supporting, highly impactful kinds of companies and entrepreneurs. We want to get on the policy front, which is, so that we can lead people in a direction where we'll improve access to capital. Because I think that if we can, and I'll throw the idea out there. I mean, I want to see a significant tax credit to invest in targeted economic development zones, tax credit to invest in startup businesses where the jobs are kept local. They can move people in for all I care. But what that will do is then you wrap around incubators there. And so, you now have given an economic incentive for somebody with a lot of capital to say, I'm going to actually look at these incubators, these online sites, crowdfunded sites, where they're in the middle of poorer communities. And I'm going to look at these things because I know that the government is giving me an economic incentive, a tax credit. Right?
Are you attracting African American professionals, men, women? Are they calling you? Are they trying to qualify for Weild & Co.? Are they,
we're getting people registered. I mean, it's you got to be careful. I mean, a lot of it's the same thing with the professional athlete community when we go forward. One of the things that I want to do, this came from Andre Porras, the president of the and founder, I think, of the Professional Black
New York Black Sports Agents, in California. You went out to visit them, actually.
Yeah, that's right. And Andre's been terrific. I mean, you talked about rap in the hip hop community. I got one of my kids produces beats and loops for the hip hop.
I heard about that.
Yeah, Jamie was dying to ask you about that. I said he's in Italy right now. But
I mean, they have phones in Italy.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna make it a point to call Mikey once a week, man, because he's ahead of his time as far as business is concerned. Jamie, this guy wants to go to work and go to school right now. Not many kids want to do that. A lot of kids want to go to school. Like I said, his daughter is the most brilliant girl you're ever going to meet. David Jr., the fifth exemplary students. But Mikey's got a gift where he actually wants to work and he wants to go to school. And he wants to get out there in the community. And he's done all of them very well. I mean, that's a kid that's juggling them all.
They're all different, I mean,
they're all unique.
But they're good, they're good kids. They're very good kids.
Very good. Let me ask you something, David. I hope it's not too personal, but can I ask you what denomination or religion are you? Do you belong to?
I don't. I mean, I don't consider my kids are being raised Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is Catholic. As I like to say, the secret to a successful marriage is, I call it the ARC theory of a successful marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Acquiescence, resignation, and capitulation.
He's playing it safe, Jamie.
But I was baptized Roman Catholic. I was raised in the Episcopal Church. I have more Jewish first cousins than non-Jewish. I've been to Israel, to the Western Wall. I've been, a number of times, which is, if you ever get a chance to do it as a Christian or as a Jew or a Muslim, it's the cradle of Western civilization. And so you have the holiest site in Judaism, which is the Western Wall, and 100 meters, 100 yards away is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is on the spot where Christ was crucified.
Yes.
You have the Dome of the Rock, which is probably the third most important site for Islam. And it contextualizes, what and grounds what you've read in the Bible growing up. It's the Sea of Galilee is a lake, and so what I would say to you, Jamie, is that a lot of people have been killed in the name of religion.
I know.
And
Yes, absolutely.
I would say that I'm very spiritual.
That's what I am. Okay, and I'm telling
Absolutely.
you this right now. But I was brought up Baptist, and then I became Presbyterian, which is one of the best. Because they were the ones who exposed me to white world. Because there was no, the black kids, we had to go to camp together with them. We had to sleep with them. We had to eat with them. With white people, we're from a ghetto. We would have never been exposed to white people. We had to stay at their house. They had to come and stay at our house. And you just reminded me of those that my pastors for the Presbyterian Church. I felt so much coming from you. It was so similar, and it was. I'm grateful for that. Before we leave, though, and I know I want to ask you two things. I want to know about the January 6th insurrection, and I want to ask you about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Should we be doing that? Give us some insight on that.
Well, let's talk about January 6th. The people play politics, as we all know. I think that, I think that if you go down to Texas and you look at this move on abortion, right, and making it illegal and criminalizing it to the extent that it is, that it's not just about voter suppression. Democrats want more minorities to vote. Republicans want less. It's about power, and I when I see when I look at what the Trump administration did with the tax bill, they disallowed the deduction of the state and local taxes from federal income tax. And I want people to kind of understand the significance of that, because I think it was strategically a brilliant move on the part of Republicans. Because what it's doing is because you can't deduct from your federal income taxes your state taxes. So if you're well-to-do, all of a sudden you've got a much bigger tax bill. It comes right out of your pocket, right? So what is that going to do? It's going to take well-to-do people and it's going to chase them to tax-free states. A couple of those tax-free states are Texas and Florida. Now, if you think that well-to-do people tend to vote disproportionately Republican many times, then you can say that if you've got a couple of states that are purple, not red, not blue, right? They're swing states. I mean, Texas was getting a little purpler, right? It wasn't so red any longer. It wasn't so Republican. You're starting to flood those states potentially with Republican votes. So those states may no longer be winnable, if they drive. Now, if you look at the abortion issue, right? If you come out really strong, I mean, I don't want to get too cynical, but you can cater to the religious,
Sheila Eldridge, or one other.
Oh, sorry. You can cater to
the religious element in Texas, fundamentalist Baptist Christians and things that are anti-abortion, but it also scares away people who are pro-choice from going into the state. It may chase some of them out of the state, right? So these and by the way, it's not just me saying. I've sat with Republicans and Democrats who have talked about strategy and putting things on polls, or rather, in the ballot box up for a forum, like gay marriage, for example, and they do analysis, behind the scenes that says, well, if we put right to gay marriage on the ballot in this particular state, it's going to flip from one party to the other 2% of the voters. And it's going to allow us to retain power. I mean, these are the kinds of analyses that go on behind the scenes. And we don't see that generally in the popular press, and they may or may not have put it through that lens, but I just want people to understand that these things, it's not just voter suppression, it's where are we moving Republicans and Democrats around geographically, and do we create incentives for people to move, and if so, how does that change the swing state analysis? And I suspect that when you look at the tax bill that Trump did, it's like crazy like a fox on some level. That the loss of the SALT deduction, I would not be surprised if people didn't say, I think this is going to drive people out of California, completely Democratic, that are the Republican minority, into tax exempt states like Texas, like Florida, from New York, Texas, and Florida, and keep those states Republican. Wouldn't be surprised. But back to your question on January 6th, it was, mortifying what happened. It was, I never expected I look at Capitol Hill as, for an American, a patriot, as being sacred ground. And, you wouldn't desecrate a church.
No. Mm-hmm.
You don't desecrate Capitol Hill. And that's what all of these people did. Now, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I'm going to just say that these people who desecrated our Capitol, they deserve to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's how I feel about it. And I think that they need to teach them a lesson, because never again can we have people who have a difference of opinion, assaulting and putting at risk and threatening, making our public servants feel at risk for their life and limb.
Right.
It's beneath us as a nation. It's beneath us. We just can't comport ourselves that way. And so, if you lose an election, you pick yourself up, you figure out how you're going to win the next one. It's a little bit like, it's like going into a boxing match. You want to have a fair fight. You know what the rules are. You play by the rules. And
right.
I think we have to bring we have to bring dignity back into politics. It's like everybody, this is what you teach your kids. You treat, and I will tell my kids this first. You have to treat people who are different from you even better than you treat people who are like you, right? I mean, it's a reflection on you. It says more about you how you treat people.
That's right.
Than it does about them.
Absolutely. I'm just so happy. I'm so happy we have you. And I just have to ask one last question, Wayne.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency? Should we be getting into that, or what? What is that?
Let me give you a different spin on it. Okay, a couple of things, right? Okay. I mean, and in the interest of fair disclosure, I'm chairman of the board of a company called INX, which was founded by some Israelis. It got the first token as a security passed through the Securities and Exchange Commission. They're going through the front door of regulation. They're embracing regulation. Wow. It's cost them a fortune to do it. It's run by an Israeli named Shai Datika, the brother of a guy that, if you look at the Bitcoin trust, which Grayscale trust that trades over the counter, was founded by a guy named Barry Silbert. And Barry was I was an advisor to Barry when he was running something called Second Markets, which was making private market trades in things like Facebook before it was public. And Barry went out early and made himself a fortune. His brother, Alan Silbert, is in the senior management team of INX. And so I'm involved with it, quite a bit from, a strategic basis. Talk about cryptos, if you value. There are different kinds of tokens or cryptos. Some of them are backed by actual fiat currency, right? Wow. Or gold or assets. Some of them are just, the only value they really have is because people think they have value. And that's Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is not a fiat currency. It's it's not backed by any other currency. It's not backed by gold, and so there's always a risk that it could turn into something that goes to zero. But when you have massive numbers of people believing in something and also concerned about inflation, right? And it's too volatile right now to be an inflation hedge. But if you think about it, the complaint about fiat currencies, the dollar, the Deutschmark, is that particularly during COVID, we printed a lot of money to keep people
right
off the streets, right?
Right.
And we did the moral thing. So I don't have any issue with that, but there's a thought that it should create ultimately some inflation, and so having some money in alternative assets, if you have a diverse portfolio, is probably a smart thing to do. Gold historically has been an inflation hedge, or having access to gold. Crypto is, for a percentage of your portfolio, probably not a bad thing to do. Bitcoin is the most popular. I would tell you that there are some structural challenges with tokens, which have to do with I'm an idiot factor, which is you can lose your crypto, and there's not a good way to get it back if you do something stupid, like somehow lose your cyber wallet, lose your token. So you've got to be very careful. It's not like the securities industry. If you lose securities, a lot of times there's an easy way to you can apply to get them back. I lost my certificates, and so one of the things and I applaud the SEC for doing this, right? When we were going through 2.5, 3 years worth of review with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the comments on the prospectus that we filed with the SEC were all about how do you afford protections in this new world to investors. If they lose something, is there a mechanism for them with your exchange or your alternative trading system? Is there a way for them to apply to get it back? Is there, we also have the other issue, which is that if there's a divorce, how do you freeze the marital assets to break them up? If there's an estate issue and somebody passes away, how do you find it, right? And so I think that what we're going to start to see is that this issue of custody for institutions, if you're a fiduciary and you're dealing with pension fund assets, you've got to solve the custody issue and the risk of losing something, because you can't lose iron workers, assets. I mean, it would put you out of business as an asset manager. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to see a lot of these protections that in the regular securities or asset management world, the traditional asset management world, have these protections that have developed in the law. And we're going to start to figure out how to create solutions within crypto. The significance of that is that it's going to embolden institutional money to increasingly move into crypto, because there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines right now, right? And I think that that's gradually going to leach into crypto, and just on a supply and demand basis is apt to be very constructive for the value over the long term of crypto. It doesn't mean that it's not going to go up and down and be wildly volatile, but it does mean that there will probably there's a case to be made for increasing demand over time for a finite supply of assets, which means almost by definition that while I can't tell you what the short term will be, but over the long term, it probably does pretty well.
It does pretty well. That's what I've been told. Any last words, Wayne? And I'm so pleased you brought David to us. And once we get our hands on him, he's ours.
Oh yeah. Well, Dave knows me pretty well now, and he knows there's no last words, because I'll have another question tomorrow, the day after, and the day after, and every day is a great learning experience with him. And just the camaraderie that we've established, the love, his family. They were my major supporters when I was down. When I spent those 15 months in the hospital, they were there not every other day. They were there, and they got me to escape the hospital and come and sit with them for Thanksgiving. And that was the greatest gift I could ever ask for.
David, do you know that when the pandemic first started, and my young man right there, Mr. Smallwood, I was introduced to him over the phone by a mutual friend, and I called him, or you called me, but I wasn't going out of the house. He had just gone through some major surgery. He got out of his bed, in into an Uber or something, went and shopped and brought me 2 or 3 bags of groceries and brought it to my home. Didn't come in because there was COVID, but that's how I met Wayne, and we have been inseparable since then because he knew how to feed me. You know, you got to feed me, Seymour.
Absolutely.
That's the way the
feed me. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
now he's
did it.
you.
that's little shop of horrors. That's what that is. Right? There you go for the movie.
But I want you guys to come back, and there's much to learn, much to unpack here, and we just don't get access to people like yourself or Wayne Smallwood, and I'm sure Wayne has told you what this platform is about. And we have to, I don't believe in God's kids harming one another. I want us to learn how to get along and love one another. I think that's what God wants. And
I want to go even further than that, Jamie, and I'm going to leave. This is what we have to get through our thick skulls in this country, right? There's a country on the other side of the globe with 1 billion more people than we have. That's an autocracy, a dictatorship, whatever you want to call it. None of us are going to do well under their thumb. Okay, that's the competition. So instead of us thinking of fighting amongst ourselves, we've got to figure out how to be the best America that we can be, the best for our people, the most productive. We've got to raise people up, and ultimately, and we've got to figure out who our friends are out there, right? I mean, who our allies are that share our kind of common values. But I got to tell you, as I've said, and Wayne's heard me say this before, I said, if there's a hot war, my white kid is going to be in a foxhole with your black kid. We're on the same damn team, okay? We are on the same team. And so we got to start acting like we're on the same team, okay? All of us. I mean, it's...
No, I know. You don't understand. I lived in Sweden 9 years. That's one of the most gentle countries, caring countries that exist. I mean, are you familiar with the social capitalism?
I spent a semester at Handelshögskolan in Stockholm, the Stockholm School of Economics.
Mm-hmm. My husband graduated, got his PhD from the University of Stockholm in economics.
Well, du pratar svenska.
Jag pratar svenska.
There you go.
Awesome.
I think this is a great marriage. I think that we want you to, Wayne.
Yes, ma'am.
You're gonna bring back this little yummy again, and also, I want you.
We'll include Mikey next time.
Okay.
He has got to meet our Mikey. He's
right on.
He's the producer. I would like to give you all a platform if there's something that you all want to discuss or whatever. You would call us up and say we would like to do XYZ or talk about. As you learn, we learn.
I'd like to say thank you to David Weild the fourth for taking the time, Jamie, to come and join us and help educate us as well. And we're so proud of the work that you're doing, Dave. And, and we know you're doing it from your heart and from your head. And it's for the betterment of not just our country, but we know specifically for our people in a certain respect, you're really elevating and lifting us and motivating every one of us. And we appreciate you for all your hard work and your dedication.
Any last words?
Yeah, it's a privilege to be able to, to work to make a contribution. I'm blessed with the ability and the thing that I think the thing that concerns me the most is ultimately we all run out of time, right? And we got a lot of work to do, and so we've got to embolden our younger people with the same sort of sense of contribution. And it's something that, the great generation, you go back to World War II, everybody came together and blacks, whites, and Jews. I mean, we fought and we beat Nazi Germany.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, this is what makes them. That's what makes America great. This stuff that happened on January 6th, that does not make America great. We just got to pull together and all start rowing the boat in the same direction and realize that there's a bigger adversary out there, a bigger challenge, and we need every one of us in this country, doing to the best of their God-given ability to make a contribution, to contribute to economic growth, to contribute to solving social problems, environmental problems, medical problems. Just everybody do a little bit. We're all going to be better off.
Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing.
Great pleasure and honor. Thank you.
It's always a blessing to speak with you. Oh, and listen, thank you so much, Wayne. You're always welcome. This is just so long, not goodbye. So just so long for a while. That's it.
There you go.
And you guys will be back, and I appreciate it so much. This is Jamie Foster Brown, and you've been visiting with me on the Jamie Foster Brown Show. We have two fabulous men, David Weild and Wayne Smallwood. Thank you.
Thank you.